Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Principles Australia Institute's webinar today around the Australian Principles Certification Program. Can I just do a quick check to see that I'm coming through loud and clear? Can everybody hear me? Just say, yeah, just give me a wave. Excellent. Okay. So as you can see, we've got a lot of people here with us today, which is fantastic. My name is Jason Renshaw. I'm the Director of Online Education at the National Excellence in School Leadership Initiative. And it is our great pleasure today to host the webinar for the Australian Principles Certification team. We do have a fantastic lineup for you today. The purpose of the webinar is to share the outcomes of the National Prototype Trial and to recognise and acknowledge the contributions made to the design of certification by members of the Principal Design team, the Principal Trial team, and the Principal Assessment team in 2015. And we're going to give you an outline how this new learning will inform certification in 2016. So kicking off the event today will be Dr. Jill DeRouge, Principal Certification Portfolio Coordinator, and she'll give you an overview on the outcomes of the prototype trial. That will be followed up with Dr. Lawrence Ingverson, who will speak on what constitutes quality evidence aligned with the Australian Principal Standard. And then we'll have our special guest, Dr. Lan Snell from Charles Sturt University, and she will present on the importance of business acumen for principals. And we'll hear insights from the Principal Design Team member, Pam Ronan, and connect remotely with Principal Trial Team members John Bray, Kate Lyon and Robin Thorpe, who will share with us their experiences throughout the trial. We'll then look at contributions of evidence and video statements from principals taken from the trial. And just so that you all know, we will have a Q&A section at the back end of this session today. So if you have any questions while we are going through the presentation today, please feel free to include them in the chat. If you look at the bottom of your interface there, you should see a little button that gives you an option to join the chat, and you can type in questions there, which Dr. Tanya Vaughan will gather together, and then towards the end of the session today, she'll endeavour to give you some answers to some of those questions. Even if we don't manage to answer your questions today, please feel free to ask them, as we will be getting a copy of all the questions, and we welcome those questions. We welcome the sorts of inquiries that you are making around this initiative. So you can also follow this on Twitter if you're a fan of tweeting and a fan of Twitter. You can see up there on the screen the hashtag for the event today, which is #Principal, Principal or Principal. That's the hashtag that we're going to be using in relation to the meeting today. Can I also remind you that if for whatever reason you're feeling a bit uncomfortable with the technology involved in the session today, we do have technical support available for you. The number to call there is 1-800-138-037. And we have technical support available here at Nestle, who are more than happy to help you through any problems that you're having today. So, an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional lands on which we meet today and respect the spiritual relationship that the owners have with their country. We acknowledge the owners' cultural and heritage beliefs and pay respect to elders of the community, past, present, and future. So I'm now going to pass this over now to Dr. Jill DeRouge. Dr. Jill is the portfolio coordinator for the certification team. Jill was principal of Chiltern St James School in Wellington, New Zealand, and of Mentone Girls Grammar, and completed doctoral studies in school leadership at the University of Sydney. Jill will be providing us with an overview of the outcomes of the National Prototype Trial. So just give me a moment to turn Jill's microphone on. Good afternoon, Jill.
Good afternoon, Jason. Thanks very much for that introduction. If I can have my first slide, please, Jason. Thank you. My brief is to give an overview of the purpose and scope and outcomes of the trial. So just to refresh memories, the trial was very much about a proof of concept of the principal certification process, and in the way of testing that concept, we were also looking that the trial would offer a great professional learning opportunity for members of both the trial team and the assessor team, and that feedback from those principals would inform work that would allow us to refine the certification product. Thanks, Jason. For our next slide, please. So the scope of the trial, our intentions were that we would be testing the portfolio initiatives as assessment tasks from the perspective of a candidate, the usability of the e-portfolio also from the perspective of a candidate, and the flip side of the coin was that we would be looking at testing assessor training materials and also the application of the assessment criteria by assessors. And doing all that, we were looking to be able to gather evidence, we hoped, of the validity and reliability of the portfolio initiatives, that the materials submitted by principals would form the basis of exemplars that could be used in future assessor training and for candidate support materials, that we'd have an assessor training program for the future, and we'd be able to revise portfolio initiatives ready for implementation of certification, as well that we would be looking to have some formal feedback to give to members of the principal trial team. So they were the outcomes we were looking for. If I can go to the next slide, please, Jason. And there's a summary there of our actual outcomes. And we're really delighted to be able to report that, yes, it has in fact been possible to design assessment tasks which measure a principal's demonstration of the Australian Principal Standard. The tasks have been mapped to the standard and found to align closely with it. So we could say that they're authentic or valid tasks. We're delighted that principals have been able to engage with those tasks successfully, and the majority of the principals in the trial team have completed. We're interested to note that there's a strong correlation between that proportion of the cohort who engage with the e-portfolio and or engage with the program of webinars offered and their successful completion of the trial. So engagement and completion go hand in hand, we've found. Another outcome is that the trained assessors, and this happened early in October, have been able to assess the submissions reliably, which we were very delighted about, and that the assessment of the task has been able to discriminate clearly between leaders who do and do not demonstrate the standard in action. Finally, the survey data from principals is to hand, and thank you very much to trial team principals who've completed surveys for us. That material around the design of the initiatives, the candidate guide, the assessment criteria, engagement with the process itself, e-portfolio usability, so forth, all of that material is now to hand and will inform our work going forward as we revise the various materials that will be needed for the future. So that's it in a nutshell. So back to you, Jason.
Thank you very much, Jill. I just need to mute Jill's microphone. Thank you, Jill. We're just going to play a short video now that is designed to show you a little bit about why is principal certification important. Enjoy.
I believe that principal certification is important because it gives the public confidence in the quality of leadership of schools and the wider school community. And in particular, it allows the profession to actually own the quality of the leadership development program that they actually implement.
I think it's massively important because it gives the profession an opportunity to be able to demonstrate to the public the work that principals do in leading schools and driving improvements in student learning outcomes. It's an opportunity to demonstrate capacity against the principal standard, which is a description of the kind of skills, knowledge, capabilities that principals have. To be able to demonstrate what they do in a school that impacts on the lives of young people in schools and improves their outcomes is a great opportunity. It enhances the status of the profession. It drives confidence in public and politicians in the work that our schools are achieving every day.
Principal certification is important because it really is about raising the profile of the profession. If we are to go out to the community and say that every school is led by a high-performing principal, then we need to provide that evidence. And a high-performing principal will be really focused on making sure that they have all of the leadership skills, competencies and knowledge that are necessary to impact on the student outcomes for their school and their community.
Okay, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Lawrence Ingverson. Dr. Ingverson is a Principal Research Fellow at the Australian Council for Educational Research and has provided significant contributions to the design of principal certification. Dr. Ingverson will be speaking today about linking research theory and practice. Welcome, Dr. Ingverson.
Thank you, and hello to everyone. I think there's a slide coming up. Yes, this is a guiding challenge, I suppose, that our ability to recognise and value quality professional work depends really on our ability to assess it. If you want to value something like principals' work, we have to be able to evaluate in ways that are reliable and valid. If we can move on to the next slide. This complex slide is quite simple, really. It shows the stages in developing certification standards, really for any profession, for any performance assessment. You can see in the first box up there, you've got to be clear about what you're assessing. In this case, what is excellence in school leadership? And for us, that's a kind of given that's set out in the Australian Professional Standards for Principals. And as you're aware, there are 3 leadership requirements and 5 leadership practices, quite complex, showing how demanding the job is. The second stage in developing a performance assessment is one I'm going to talk about a little bit further. How will we assess it up? How will we capture, I like this word, how will we capture evidence of excellence in school leadership? And as you're aware, there are 3 portfolio initiatives, 3 tasks that have been developed over the past year or so and have just been piloted, field tested, and as Jill was talking about just a few minutes ago. The stage we've reached in a meeting we just had recently at the end of the field test is, okay, you've got the evidence. What counts as meeting the standard? How will we set the standard? So under that, in the blue box, you can see the setting standards. This is the process of defining levels of performance with rubrics, identifying benchmarks for each level, and training assessors to assess the entries to high levels of reliability. That's the recent challenge we've been facing and trialing. If I could have the next slide. The question that was posed to me was, what is good evidence? Well, in one sense, it's straightforward. Evidence can, the standard sets out the evidence, what principals should know and be able to do, and good evidence is that which shows the standard in practice. The important challenge here is that the evidence isn't just lying around to be gathered. The evidence has to be created and interpreted. And the assessment tasks need to be developed to give principals a structure within which to document their leadership initiatives. So what matters here most is not so much the evidence itself, whether it's NAPLAN data or whatever. What matters more is what a principal makes of the evidence, the quality of the analysis, discussion, and reflection. And this is what the assessors were being trained to make note of, to direct their attention to, not just the evidence, but how is the evidence analysed and reflected on. So if I could have the next slide. Well, What in asking about what are good ways to present evidence, these seem to us to be the best ways to assess a principal's performance for certification. The assessment needs to be based on authentic tasks. These are things that principals view as part of their normal responsibility, not add-ons. It's a mistake to just assess one professional practice in isolation. The tasks or the initiatives that we've developed try to be meaningful chunks of work that allow a principal to show how they've met the standards in their school context. And each portfolio initiative was conceived of as a kind of a project with long-term goals, not a snapshot in time. You can't show how you have really made a difference to your school over a short period of time. We're talking here a period of a year or more, for the evidence to really change, evidence to come to the fore. And for us, the structured portfolio initiatives were best suited to measuring change over time, such as changes in measures of staff collaboration or changes in student behaviour, student achievement. So they are the three portfolio initiatives. And if I can just have the last slide there. The point of the trial was to determine, are these three portfolio initiatives we've developed effective as a means of capturing evidence? Do principals see them as feasible, authentic, fair as well, and meaningful ways to demonstrate how they meet the standard? That was the first one. And the second point, is it possible to train other principals to use those assessment guides consistently, to interpret them consistently, and that is to reach high levels of agreement in assessing these portfolio initiatives, and to establish benchmarks those benchmarks can set out the various levels of performance against the standards, and will be vital to later training of assessors when a certification system goes live next year. So the national prototype trial showed quite convincingly that these two aims were achieved well. And I think there can be considerable confidence now about moving to the next stage, going to scale with a national certification system. So well done.
Thank you very much, Dr. Inderson, and thank you very much for joining us today and sharing those insights. As you can see, we've got quite a few people in the meeting now. I'd like to personally thank Lawrence as well, because we needed to lift our game a little bit in order to make sure he got the right technical support to join us today, and I really do thank you for your patience today, Dr. Inderson. That's most appreciated. Our next presenter is going to appear in a moment, is Pam Ronan. Pam is the principal of St Francis de Sales College, which is a Catholic K-12 school in South Australia. Pam was part of certification principal design team this year. She provided input into the design of certification prior to and during the actual trial. Pam will be speaking today about the importance of certification being designed by and for the profession.
Need my mic on?
Thank you, Pam. Sorry, I just couldn't recognise your ID name on the screen there, but you're on there now. So,
thank you very much, Jason, and great to, I guess, follow up on some of the things that Dr. Indersen's just talked about, because I guess my interest in this whole project was the fact that it's the first time ever in the history of Australia that we've had a chance to set standards for the profession by the profession and have them assessed by professionals who know and understand the scope and complexity of principals' work. So what was really exciting about this was that I was thinking back to how I started as a beginning principal and how inspiring it would have been to have had a clear idea of some of the ways in which we can measure high quality leadership, not just of learning and competence in working in complex environments, but what is it that we value as a profession, value from expert peers, and have a kind of highly trustworthy, well-credentialed certification system that really is a hallmark of our profession. I've looked at some of the work overseas, and I can see that even internationally, this is a highly portable model of how you capture, not just, as you say, a snapshot, but how you capture the scope and complexity of the practical work that leaders do, the experimental work that is often the foreground of new innovation and high impact learning, but also principals spend a lot of their time in deep inquiry. We are influenced by particular theoretical perspectives and viewpoints. And I think the case study approach allows us to capture that in very innovative, creative, and also diverse ways so that we can actually understand the widespread implementation of effective professional practices which can drive not just a nationally consistent recognition of quality, but principals being able to drive continual improvement in our colleagues' practice, in our own practice, but also in ways that I guess give great credibility and public assurance to what makes a quality, well-certified system that values the professional standards that our principals can achieve. I think the main point for me was that this wasn't just a performance-based assessment. This wasn't about taking a bit of your school plan and putting it up and then showing how you ticked all the boxes, but it was about that real high-level professional engagement across Australia. And as part of the design team, it was an absolute privilege to work with principals from all around Australia, as well as with Dr. Invalson and also with the PAI team, to make sure that the Australian Principal Certification would be a world-class certification that we could wear and I guess identify with pride. So if we go to the last slide, Jason, I think one of the things that is important is that it's valid, it's reliable, it's credible, and it's trustworthy. And I love the way that Ron Bamford from Canning Vale College has said it. Ron says that the development process for principal certification has as its core value principals making decisions about the principal profession. This is a bottom-up approach which will ensure that the certification process is grounded in reality. And as he does go on to say, you know, it's only going to be useful if it's a way in which we can value and recognise the best in our profession, how they've achieved that, and have very rich, detailed and well-scoped exemplars of how we can reflect on our practice and also gain high-level, high-quality professional endorsement. Thanks, Jason.
Nicely said and nicely done, Pam. Thank you very much for that.
It's quite significant that the Australian Principals Standard was acknowledged and endorsed by every sector, the private, the public and the Catholic sector. It was acknowledged and endorsed by every education minister, which is quite significant. And I think that's something to be applauded. It's probably the only area in Australia at the moment where we have an agreement politically. So that to me is a step in the right direction.
I think it's really important that principals lead the certification process because they have the expertise in the practice and the learning that has taken place over an extended period of time is something that should be valued and supported. And with the appropriate support, being able to design a program that is authentic and of high quality, I think is best handled by the profession itself.
It's extremely important because the principal standard was developed by the profession. It demonstrates, or states rather, the kind of skills and capabilities that we should be seeing in our school leaders. The certification process is an opportunity to evidence that. So it really needs to be controlled by the profession. It needs to be free from employer responsibilities or employer requirements or system or sector related intricacies. It needs to be something that is relevant for the entire profession, and it's the profession of principalship that needs to drive that.
It's very important that principals lead the certification. They know about their own school context. They really have an understanding of what it is to be a principal in a school and the leadership skills that are required. And it's really important that principals are able to contribute to the certification process, because at the end of the day, they really know about the sub-skill sets that are required.
I do apologise, I inadvertently cut off the end of that video. I do apologise. But that said, let's forge on. Our next speaker today, gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Lan Snell, who will talk about the business acumen involved in principalship. Lan is the course director for the Faculty of Business at Charles Sturt University, where she leads curriculum development, course development and review and accreditation. Her research interest relates to organisational adaptation and identifying the leadership competencies critical for managing services. Over to you, Dr. Snell.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone, and good afternoon to everyone that's watching on this webcast. Thank you again to PAI for inviting me to speak with you this afternoon. I've got a 4-minute slot, so let's see how I go in keeping to the time. Jason, would you mind moving on to the next slide, please? I guess what I'd like to begin by saying is that how absolutely thrilled we are as in Charles Sturt University in partnering up with PAI. The MOU agreement that we have recently signed really reflects our joint intention for ongoing collaboration in bringing about education excellence through a number of initiatives like service improvements, professional development, clearly the certification program, and from my perspective, some research as well. Next slide, please, Jason. I'd like to give you a background a bit, if you just to pause and give you a bit more of a background in terms of our partnership, and just to really contextualise our involvement with PAI. So, like, a key aspect of my role as course director at CSU is to really pick out some trends. So, drawing on a set of internal and external data, I'm kind of expected to anticipate what the future state might look like. And so, about a year ago, I kind of noticed a bit of a spike in our enrolment in our MBA program, which is delivered entirely online. And so when we looked at this segment, we looked at try to understand what the demographic profile of this cohort, and here's what it looked like. And so we know that this cohort is geographically dispersed, and so we've got teachers from all over Australia, WA, Victoria, Queensland, all over, you know, SA. Majority of this particular cohort were from independent schools. In terms of titles, we've got people that are head of departments, deputy principals, principals. Unanimously, all of them are tertiary qualified. So everyone had an undergraduate, a Bachelor of Education. The majority have postgraduate qualifications, be it in Master of Education or Master of Education Leadership. All of them work full-time, and there were some in this cohort that are teaching professionals considering a switch into a sort of consulting kind of role. And so what this information really tells us is that clearly we have a geographically dispersed cohort interested in gaining further qualifications outside their traditional discipline of education. How absolutely refreshing. Next slide, please, Jason. I mean, we only really have to look at the literature to know that there's been, you know, a fairly significant shift towards a more macro expectation of the role of the principal today. We know that these include functions that are typically of management. So what we have is things like resource management in a typically resource-constrained environment, stakeholder management, project management, understanding what the financial outcomes are, developing partnerships with the community, alumni, and clearly that we've got some marketing and PR aspects in this role expected of principals today as well. And so importantly, I think it is noteworthy to say that this partnership is aligned with the Office of Learning and Teaching priority areas, namely employability skills and also improving institutional pathways across higher education. Next slide, if you don't mind, Jason. The partnership also builds on work undertaken by the B20 Human Capital Task Force report, which aims to ensure that people are appropriately skilled and have the capability, flexibility and adaptability to participate in the workforce of today, and importantly, the workforce of the future. Now, this kind of fits very nicely with Turnbull's sort of mandate at the moment of innovation and agility. So it's just perfect in that regard. So the school leader not only requires an understanding of pedagogy and curriculum design, but requires the skills and competencies of management to lead contemporary learning cultures now and also into the future. My final slide, please, Jason. And so what we have here is that aspiring principals with a proven track record in teaching excellence who also have an MBA present a very compelling and attractive package that is increasingly being sought. So in closing, I just want to state that I'm very much looking forward to working with you and the PAI team as we progress through this journey of certification together. So thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Dr. Snell. Very well put. Thank you for your contribution today.
It's really a really complex question you ask me. My leadership is driven from moral purpose, and I see a really key part of my leadership is developing leadership capacity within the school, but primarily my leadership is around improving student outcomes and improving children's life chances.
Well, strong leadership is extremely important in setting the vision for the school and putting into place the opportunities for teachers to thrive in their classrooms. And then, of course, that means that student outcomes will be positively affected. So the principal is working very hard to ensure that everything is in place so that students in their classrooms can have the best opportunities for learning that are available.
The principal needs to be able to look at themselves as a professional and to analyse their practice and ask themselves the deeper questions about what they need to know, what they need to be able to do, how they can improve their practice, how they can extend their influence to not only the teachers in their care and the students in their care, but to the broader community of principals and indeed to the broader community.
Our next speaker will be an actual practicing principal. It's going to be great now to hear from Kate Lyon. Kate is the principal of Karratha Primary School in Western Australia. Most of Kate's career in education leadership has occurred in regional and remote areas. Kate completed the Portfolio Initiative number 2 as part of the principal trial team, and we'll be speaking to you about the role of principals as instructional leaders.
Thanks, Jason. Good morning, afternoon to everyone. It's still morning in Western Australia. Today I'm honoured to speak about my experience in the Australian Principal Certification Trial and how it sharpened my focus on enhancing student learning. Student learning is core to the central core of principals' work, and this was clearly evident for all of us trial participants, regardless of which of the portfolio initiatives we engaged in. As Jason said, I completed Portfolio Initiative 2, which focused on how I increased the level of professional community activity in my school and thereby the professional learning of my colleagues, the quality of their professional practice, and in consequence, the quality of learning opportunities and outcomes for students, the focus on enhancing student learning. My trial portfolio focused around a performance growth plan which I had developed with my leadership team, with a specific focus on the element within the plan of developing staff professional practice through professional learning communities. And this was part of a journey of developing our staff, a journey that we're still on, and I believe and hope that we will always be on. Lifelong learning is in our school vision for all of us. I concentrated on the quality of classroom teaching, knowing, as we all do, the significance of the impact this has on student learning. As a principal, my greatest effectiveness is the impact I can have in supporting teachers and building their capacity. So this is where I put my attention and resources as an instructional leader. So in completing my portfolio, I reflected and assessed against the Australian Professional Standard for Principals. Although the focus of the prototype trial was deliberately limited in scope, I was pleasantly surprised at how many links I could make to the professional practices and the leadership requirements of the standard. For example, the professional learning communities focused on teaching and learning, so I had a direct role in leading teaching and learning. I developed myself and others by creating teams, building the capacity of staff, and engaging in working towards accreditation myself as a growth coach. I led improvement, innovation and change, and ensured that we resourced the vision accordingly. It was very clear to me that when we as principals focus on enhancing student learning, we are doing our core business and therefore are aligned with the standard. And of additional value to me personally was reflecting against the AITSL leadership profiles to see the progression of the professional practices, which helped me focus on further self-improvement as a principal. The draft candidate guide was invaluable as I developed my portfolio, collected evidence and wrote my reflective analysis. The clarity of instructions for each step of the process made it easy to navigate the e-portfolio, to adhere to the guidelines and know exactly what was expected, and the suggested references were incredibly useful, as well as becoming a resource list for my future professional reading. And I went back to the candidate guide over and over during the trial. Now it looks a little worse for wear with highlighting and tabs and dog-eared pages. And I think the webinars and updates, email updates, really complemented the information in the candidate guide. And I'm sure that the design team has since added much of this information into the guide for the full certification process. When I was considering what I'd talk about today, I reflected on the personal benefits for me of being involved in the principal trial team. The self-reflection and self-assessment required for the certification trial resulted in me being able to validate and celebrate the work that I do every day, and I spent quality time documenting what I do as a principal, and this renewed my focus on and enthusiasm for further improvement. It sharpened my focus on the core business of improving student outcomes and the direct implementation of our school vision and our school plans. And the trip to Melbourne and the collegiality and networking were an added bonus. So I'd like to thank Principals Australia Institute for the opportunity to be involved in the Australian Principal Certification Trial. It has been an incredible experience and a great professional learning activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Our next speaker is John Bray. Now, John is former principal of Cape York Aboriginal Australian Academy in Queensland. As part of this year's principal trial team, John completed Portfolio Initiative 1. John's focus today will be about the importance of engaging the school community.
Thanks, Jason. How's that coming through? First slide. Thanks, Jason.
It's up there, John. Can you see it?
I'll get started. Yep. I know I got a really unstable internet connection from up here at Lockhart River State School. How's that? It's all right. Yep. The first slide when you're ready. Yep, great. Look, this was one of the most fantastic initiatives I've ever been involved in. As what I've done as a leader, what I'm currently doing, it's really it really set the stage for me in terms of the next stage of my leadership. Reflect around the standards. Really got me stuck into actually what the standards actually mean and the interdependent nature of each one of the areas. And I know certainly looking at the personal qualities, social and interpersonal skills aspects of the standard in regards to the leadership requirements really sort of helped me reflect on what I had done around a holistic community approach to skill renewal. So that first slide there, you'll see basically that's the pedagogical approach, the whole skill community approach of what we've done at West Arnhem College, and that's a community initiative. And it looks quite simplistic, but boy, was it very complex. And when I sat down and went through the process of plan, act, review, and respond within the whole certification trial, it really got me thinking about how the standard works. And certainly when I was engaged in working with the community area of the trial, it really showed me that the interdependent nature of each one of the areas of the professional practices. So the aspect of the trial really got me to think about what's the best way to present and how to do that. And that's why I sort of used, this is the first page of a web page that I've established to actually, which I gave to the trial team, because I thought it was the best way to do it, because I captured video throughout the whole process when I did this at West Arnhem College. And by capturing video, it really helped explain through images, but also through dialect with the community about what happens within the college. So it was a fantastic way to do that. Next slide, thanks, Jason. So this next slide, if you just keep pressing through, Jason, it's okay. You'll see it's a real simplistic nature about how we work within the community, what the initiative actually through the principal standard helped me understand about what the high expectation relationships for our students in our community, what it means. The foundation of all this is around the relationships and how we work together. And that's that stronger, smarter approach. You'll see the pillars of great schools is, it's always about teaching and learning and facilities and, of course, our great parents and community. But the key aspect is about how we work together. And that's a strong aspect about building those strong relationships in our community. And that's what made the difference. And you'll see that's what then helped build those pillars and, of course, the expectations in our community. And that was the interdependent nature. And when I sat down, I really saw, over time it was developmental. The change was really evident over the 2 years that this developed. And it's still going today. And that was, you talk about the standard in action, and you realise you yourself as a leader, once you really drill down and have a look at what's going on, it really helps you understand about what you do and how you do it. And by then being able to provide the evidence, it actually also helps you celebrate the success. And I think it's a key aspect with our profession, celebrating the success, sharing it with our colleagues, and getting the feedback and how we respond when we get that feedback, because that's so important. So I want to thank the PAI for a great initiative, and also my colleagues around Australia who's helped provide me the feedback as well. So thank you, and thanks, Jason.
Thank you very much, John. Well said, and we really appreciate you taking time today from that another remote location. We've had Karratha, now we've had you there. And we have another principal who's going to be talking to us now. Her name is Robin Thorpe. And Robin is principal of Batchelor Area School in Northern Territory. Robin has always been interested in innovative practice and holds a strong interest in using ICT across the curriculum to improve learning. Having completed Portfolio Initiative 2 during the trial, Robin will speak to us today about the importance of collegiality amongst school leaders.
Thanks, Jason. Am I Can you hear me? Great. To begin with, I'd like to give a little bit of the context of the school that I'm in, and I walked into a principalship at the beginning of the year into this school, and it had a really strong academic partnership with a university, and that was around focusing on improving reading across the school by building teacher capacity. Now, it was quite alarming for me to read a feedback report from those academic partners that I had two schools in one site. So I had a group of teachers who were deeply committed, who were working hard, getting great results as part of the project. But then I had some disengaged teachers who were unwilling or unable to change their practice, and they were waiting it out. So that meant there were, of course, inconsistent gains in student learning. So this really honed my vision or my focus for the school, which was about strengthening collaborative practices to increase commitment and consensus to this professional learning activity. Next slide. Thanks, Jason. So to do that, I knew I needed to create the conditions to increase collegiality and a culture of peer feedback. And at the foundation of that is, of course, creating trust, strengthening relationships between myself and staff, between staff themselves. And to do that, I needed to build credibility as a lead learner, which included being able to not just walk the talk, but also talk the walk. It included creating the conditions for collaboration, and in all schools we know that time is the most important resource that we have. So I needed to allow for that. I needed to have high expectations for all my teachers to learn and to provide that balance of pressure and support for them to get that commitment and consensus. So some of that support included mentoring and coaching, reciprocal peer observations, walkthroughs, reflective practice meetings, and ensuring that there was collective ownership of the data. And of course, it was important for me to build leadership practices within my own staff as well and distribute that leadership. Next slide, please, Jason. So throughout this trial, my own personal reflections were that I needed to really demonstrate collegial practices myself, the way that I worked with and through others, and not just within the school, but also across our jurisdiction. It was important for me to show that I could learn side-by-side teachers and demonstrate that I'm a learner as well. During the trial, we were required to collect video evidence, and I think that was great for me to do that and role model to my teachers that I was prepared to gather illustrations of practice, which is now an expectation of our teachers within the school as well. The trial also really helped me to hone in on knowledge that I had about leadership, about what the standard said and how do I put it into action. So it really gave me that opportunity to clarify and focus. What were the leadership practices that I needed and the requirements as I needed to reflect on what matters most? Because as a principal, a new principal coming in, sometimes there's lots of overwhelming agendas and we tend to focus on operational things. So I was really excited to be able to really hone in on that. Peer feedback from other principals, collegiality through the e-portfolio, engaging with that, seeing what other work was put up there was really important for me as well. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you very much, Robin. Very well done. Thank you for being part of the presentation today. We are now going to, we've got Dr. Tanya Vaughan, who's been very carefully going through all the questions that she's been asked through the chat, both in the public chat, but also through some private messaging that she's been getting through that chat function. So I'll just do a little bit of magic here with the technology and get Tanya up on your screen in a moment.
Thank you, Jason. Fantastic to be here today with all of you. And we've had lots of questions coming through in the chat, so thank you for those. We'll go to the first one that we've received for this afternoon is from Michael Phillips, and it's asking the question of, in developing the final principal certification program, what are the biggest challenges that now need to be overcome? And I'll hand over to our director, Louisa Rennie, to answer that question, please, Jason.
Michael, for that question. We've got lots of challenges ahead, and I think where we are right now is very much at the point of analysing the evidence that we have captured through the trial. It's really important that we pay attention to the evidence and the reflections of principals who've engaged in the trial. There's a lot of learning there for us as the certification team and at Principals Australia Institute, and we really do want to give justice to the commitment that principals have made to the process to this point by giving due diligence to the evidence that we have received. So we're getting a lot of feedback through that evidence as well about the things that we need to finalise as we go forward. So we're looking forward to sharing the next steps around that with you in 2016.
Thanks, Louisa. Another question that we've received is the question of how many portfolio initiatives, this came through prior to the webinar, how many portfolio initiatives do you think a principal will have to undertake in order to complete certification? So over to you, Louisa. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya. Thanks again for that. For the purpose of the trial, we asked principals to focus on a particular aspect of one of the 3 portfolio initiatives because we were going through a very short trial. Secondly, when we did develop the initiatives and in our work with Dr. Lawrence Ingverson in that space, we were very careful to ensure that each initiative provided principals the opportunity to demonstrate the full standard in action. We know that the leadership requirements and the professional practices are interdependent, and we didn't want to pull them apart. So that's the second point. The third point is that as a result of the trial, in one of the specific questions we asked trial team members in the survey was to advise us, based on their experience and the input that they gave to the trial, what was their opinion about how many initiatives a principal might need to go through to demonstrate or to achieve full certification. And principals are the hardest people on themselves, we think. So at the moment, we could probably say that principals are saying between 2 and 3 of the initiatives that principals think that they should have to engage in up to 3 of the initiatives to demonstrate that full certification experience. As I said, we are still in the process of evaluating the evidence and feedback that's coming through to us, so we will have more detail around that in our report, which I'll talk to you about at the end of the webinar.
Okay, I do apologise, Tanya, but I do need to play the MC role here and make a bit of a warning about our time limits. We've got principals who need to get back and do some real work at any time very shortly. But I just want to assure everybody that we've gathered all the questions that have been contributed. And I'd also like to point out that in that portal environment where you found the registration to get into this webinar, there's also a Q&A section there where you can actually leave some questions or have some discussions. And Tanya and her team will capture all of that, and absolutely everybody will get an answer to any question that they may have placed for us. So while we had the director up and answering some questions, we might as well keep it going, I think. I'd like now to introduce Louisa Rennie, who is the Director of Australian Principal Certification. Over to you, Louisa.
Jason, thanks very much. It's my great pleasure to summarise, I suppose, in brief, what we've experienced today in the webinar. And I would like to start, if I could, Jason, just flick onto that first slide, by thanking and acknowledging two very important corporate sponsors, and more than sponsors, I think the word partners is important to highlight here. So firstly, a huge vote of thanks to NESLI, the National Excellence in School Leadership Initiative, which was the first corporate body to formally partner with us at Principals Australia Institute in regard to Australian Principal Certification. NESLI offer a really dynamic leadership development, a range of leadership development programs for school leaders, and they work across more than Australia, but other countries, including North America and the Asia Pacific. You can see today that their expertise in developing and running online courses is really evident through the webinar that we're experiencing. So I really would like to thank them for hosting us today. Particular thanks to Damien Farrell, and thank you to Jason, the Director of Online Education, for his support today. Thanks, Jason. On to the next slide, thank you. And an opportunity for me to thank and also formally announce a new partnership with Charles Sturt University. And they have recently, as you heard from Dr. Lansnell earlier in the presentation, formalised a memorandum of understanding with us at Principals Australia Institute. And the core of the collaboration between both the Institute and Charles Sturt University will be in regard to principal certification. I think we can say that both PAI and CSU play a really important role in recognising leadership, and they do understand the importance of quality school leadership and the vital role that principals play in creating that vibrant learning culture. So while CSU is headquartered in Bathurst in New South Wales, you heard from Lan about the online provision of learning opportunities that they provide. So home base might be in Bathurst, but they do have a very strong online presence. And we really look forward in the months ahead to continue to build the relationship with CSU and to investigate the possibility of joint research, development and promotion of postgraduate study pathways for principals, and recognition of advanced standing for entry into the respective programs of both parties. So thank you very much to Dr. Lansnell and to Charles Sturt University for having confidence in the journey that we are on with principals to recognise excellence in school leadership. We really do appreciate your commitment to this cause. So in summary, Jason, I'll get you to go on to the next slide, please, if I could. I do want to return to the vision and what we've been charged to investigate, explore, design and develop here. And that is a certification experience process that is by the profession, for the profession and the communities that they serve. And you heard that message really strong, came through very strongly this earlier on in the webinar from Pam Ronan. Principals are at the heart of this. They have been engaged in every step along the way, and they have been partners, co-designers in this process. It's imperative to us that we recognise the outstanding leaders that we have in this country and the impact that they have. And so it's been so exciting to be able to bring that to life through this recent trial. On the next slide, we have a copy of the Australian Professional Standard for Principals, which I know everybody is very aware of. We heard from Lawrence about the fact that the trial did achieve a convincing conclusion that principals can demonstrate, capture and document evidence of the standard in action. and that principals can assess evidence in a consistent, valid and reliable way. It's amazing that we do have a standard. That's been an amazing accomplishment in our country. A standard in action is better, and a standard in action owned by the profession is the best you're going to get. And we have principals in this country who are willing, prepared and able to stand up and be accountable for their own standard. A really powerful message coming from the principalship. If I could go on to the next slide there, Jason, we have a circular diagram there that we set out at the very beginning of designing principal certification, and we still use this to guide our way. I won't go into detail here, but we do have more information on our website about these 4 pillars that underpin principal certification. But what I will say is this: certification is about 2 things. It's about the recognition, but it's also about the professional learning. And a quality certification system provides an invaluable professional learning opportunity that informs improvement and growth in school leaders. And that needs to be underpinned by a quality assured feedback process that allows that provision of continuous feedback that can be directly applied to practice. So we're really looking forward to take the learning from the trial and get it into the next stage of development and into the future implementation of Australian Principal Certification and Australian First. The next slide sets out for you some of the challenges that we have as we go ahead, and this might be in some way a response to Michael's earlier question: what are some of the challenges ahead? We are challenged by principals that we must develop something that follows the Apple criteria. It must be administratively feasible for the Institute and for principals. It must be professionally acceptable, publicly credible, legally defensible and economically affordable. So the next tranche of our work is to really focus on that. We've got 3 main things, I think, or 4 really, that we're setting about for the remainder of this year and into next year. The first is, as I said earlier, the analysis of the evidence and the principal reflections. Really critical that we pay attention to that. Secondly, we are taking the learning from that and putting that into an evaluation report, which we will make available to you very soon via the website, and a number of key ways of getting messages out to you: email, website, Twitter, and so on. Third, we are undertaking to provide all principals who engaged in the trial with personal feedback from the National Assessment Team. We think this is really important, and one of the reasons that we're doing it is to acknowledge the commitment that those individual principals made to this process and to thank them. We are really appreciative that there were so many principals around the country who were willing to put their hand up and give this a go and be part of shaping the future of the principal profession. And finally, our final task, at least for this year, is to set about setting up our communication strategy to share with you about the steps that we are taking in 2016 to progress principal certification. So we will be in touch with you about those 4 things very soon. And the next slide there really says to you, we've heard from many people today, as I have indicated in my comments earlier. But finally, and perhaps most importantly, we've heard from principals. We've heard from principals who put students at the centre of their work and at the centre of their focus. And we've heard about the importance of reflection and focus on self. Some really strong feedback that's coming back from the trial is that, and from our consultation, is that principals know and understand the importance for reflection. They know how important it is that if they want to improve as leaders, they need to focus on themselves. We see ourselves as advocates for the principalship, in that we are advocating for the fact that principals need time. They need time to be able to focus on themselves in order to improve and be the outstanding leaders that their school communities expect them to be. So on the final slide, I invite all of you to be a part of shaping the future of the profession. Visit our website, follow us on Twitter. please keep in touch with us so that we can continue to share with you the steps we are taking to achieve a full principal certification experience in Australia. Thank you very much, everyone, for your participation and engagement today. It's been a fantastic milestone to achieve. Thank you. Back to you, Jason.
Thank you very much, Louisa, and well said. We are coming to the close of the session now. I just want to give participants a reminder that this session was recorded, so if you would like to refer to anything that was spoken about today, a recording of this webinar will appear in the Nestle portal that you've already been invited to. You can contact either Nestle or Principals Australia if you want to get some information on how to access that. On behalf of Nestle and Principals Australia, I really want to thank everybody who participated today, in particular Dr. Lawrence Ingverson, Dr. Lance Snell, Pam Ronan, Kate Lyon, John Bray, and Robin Thorpe. Thank you very much to those principals who took part today. And I hope you found it informative. I hope you share our enthusiasm for principal certification and what it represents and what it means for your particular sector. Thank you very much, everyone, and enjoy your afternoon.